Welcome to the So What from BCG, the podcast that explores the big ideas shaping business, the economy, and society. In this episode, why a digital future is upending traditional people management with Jens Baier. Jens, what's the so what?
There is a perfect storm going on, and at the center of this storm, the HR function or people management function sits. You need to rethink significantly the way you are doing HR. It has to become much more strategic. It has to be much more analytical and data-driven. It's not just people management. It's really understanding what are the business needs, what's happening in the market, what are external trends that will have an impact on my organization, and how can I best prepare my organization from a talent and a skill perspective for upcoming challenges.
The world of work is changing. AI and Gen AI, with its demand for new skills and new ways of working, is only set to intensify the already fierce competition for talent. But are companies and their current people strategies ready for this change? How do businesses and HR leaders rethink their approach to attracting and retaining top talent in this new environment? I'm Georgie Frost, and today on the So What, I'm talking to Jens Baier, who leads the HR transformation topic at BCG.
So obviously it's always hard to generalize, right? Because there are companies who have already been quite advanced in the past. But if I would really look at how does a typical HR function look like let's say 5-10 years ago, it was a rather administrative, operational function. It was just a service function, maybe behind the curtain, you could say, right? I mean, if there was a need from the business, they would service the business, but there was not a proactive function that had a seat at the table discussing strategies, strategic scenarios, and the implication of the workforce. They were more like, let's ask if we have a problem, but let's not get their advice upfront. That was the starting point, at least at many organizations. If you take a critical look, probably some of the companies are still there, right? It has been transformed, but not everybody is there yet.
Does this require brand new skills within HR departments?
To a certain degree, and for some departments, it might be the case that you really need new skills. For example, it takes this Gen AI example. Yeah, HR is really a critical role in two ways. So one way is obviously you can use Gen AI for the HR function itself to better deliver your services, to tailor them, and to customize them. And at the same time, HR is one of the functions that supports the overall company transformation driven by Gen AI. And for that, you need specific skills. You need to understand the technology. You need to understand what data requires, and you need to understand the up and reskilling need. And you have to prepare also from a change perspective and enable your leaders to deal with this change.
We'll talk further about that part of it, but I'm interested in the former, which is AI and Gen AI transforming HR function itself. What are some of the most exciting developments that you're seeing? How is it affecting it?
I think what's really new to former developments when we had new technologies is that Gen AI is really impacting the complete employee life cycle, so to speak. It starts really from AI and Gen AI driven workforce planning, recruiting, employer branding, onboarding, talent management, performance management, and the like. I think the difference is really to previous developments is really, it's not only about transactional tasks that can be automated or digitized. It's really that also the conceptual, more creative part within HR can be, supported by Gen AI. So it's not this one single step that stands out. It's really an impact everywhere, and that's why this change and transformation is so big.
You sort of touched on it, but I want to delve a little bit deeper about what the ideal HR function looks like now so it can best adapt, best prepare for the future, particularly in AI-driven workplace. And flexibility must be very key.
In an ideal world, you really shift from being reactive to being proactive. And in order to become proactive, you have to have an understanding of what are potential scenarios. What you need to understand is if a company really wants to adapt significantly new technologies like Gen AI, and Gen AI is only one example, you have to understand which roles in your organization are impacted how. Nobody knows the future, but you have to do that in scenarios, like what if scenarios. What if certain things happen, and how can you translate that into real assessments? Once you have this clarity, you can then really say, okay, what are the relevant skills that I need to build up? What are the talents that I need to recruit? What are the career paths I needed to build up? The better you have an understanding of what are potential future scenarios, the better you can act and the more proactive you can be.
To me, this implies a a bigger seat at the table, as it were, the top table, a good collaboration with leaders?
Absolutely. I think it requires a couple of things. So one thing is being really close to the leaders, being close to the business. You need to understand business strategy and the business logic. Otherwise, you cannot translate this business logic and strategy into workforce scenarios, right? First thing. Second thing is, as HR, you have to be very analytical in order to really translate those trends into scenarios and models. So I think that's a new capability. This goes next to, let's say, the traditional HR capabilities and expertise.
We've spoken about the HR function and where that sits within the business and its understanding of the business. But what about its understanding of talent? The requirements of talent have shifted somewhat over recent years, but it's not a uniform shift. Obviously, not every talent demographic wants the same thing. So what is top talent after nowadays, and what does this mean for business and for HR?
Talent's preferences have shifted significantly, and especially since COVID. We at BCG, we are running one of the largest talent studies in the world, the Decoding Global Talent Study. What we can see here, and we started that 10 years ago, for the first time, job security has emerged as number one topic from a talent perspective. We took a closer look at it and de-averaged this. And what you could see is really that the younger talents like Generation Z, Millennials, even Generation X, for those groups, right, job security is of utmost importance. Only the relatively more senior or older generation, like the boomers, for them, it's much more about good relationships with colleagues, appreciation for your work, etc. More the softer factors, so to speak. This is a big change. Historically, job security wasn't ranked as high, and this could really be also driven by these technological advancements, because people worry about being employed, employability, up and reskilling. So career paths really matter to make sure that my job stays secure and I'm attractive for employers out there.
To me, when I hear the news around this subject, it always seems the younger generations, they're all about, especially now, is my company, does it have values, sustainability, a great work-life balance? It sort of almost seems like we're reverting back to the job security. And ironically, in an age where we're probably going to have a lot less job security with AI and Gen AI.
Actually, good work-life balance is still very important. It really ranks amongst the top topics from talent perspective. And what we see in our data is really that there's a correlation. The more you feel that your job is at risk, driven by technological advancements, for example, like, Gen AI, the more you really value job security, obviously, right? So there's a clear correlation that stood out of the data that we looked at.
Tell me more about that data, because again, I was quite surprised. I would have thought more people would be concerned about AI and Gen AI taking over their jobs, but actually that's not really the case. It's more about the fact that their job is going to change significantly. And I suppose the concern with that is, do people have the right skills? Are businesses supporting their workers and an HR function? Are they supporting workers in upskilling or reskilling?
Exactly. And probably this figure might change, right? But when we conducted the study in 2024, only like 5% of the people we are talking to, and it was more than 150,000 participants in that study, really believe that Gen AI or AI will replace their jobs. It's more about that their jobs will change. Like 70% believe there will be significant change. And this goes hand in hand that there is a very high willingness to be upskilled. Nearly everybody said, I would love to be upskilled, or I will be upskilled if I need to, right? So there's a very high openness for upskilling and building up the right skills to stay employable in an organization.
How can a company and how can HR, and I think of this in terms of retaining talent, because it's vital that workers feel, if job security is so important to them, secure. So what role and how can HR within a business make employees feel more secure?
Topics like up and reskilling programs, career paths, long-term careers perspectives really matter for talents. They have to think about really how can we incorporate up and reskilling into our culture so that it really becomes common that people and employees really spend time on building up new skills. They could also really think about what are right and attractive career paths, so that really talents can move around in the organization, learn new things and adapt to the change. So much more flexibility in the way you develop talents is absolutely crucial.
What's the significance of an increasingly global workforce? Whether that's people wanting to move abroad or whether that's the fact that with remote working, we can get really workers from anywhere. How do HR stay ahead of that one?
So what we see here actually is that there is a high willingness to move abroad.
What do you put that down to, Jens?
If you take a closer look, it's like 1/4 of all respondents said they would be willing to work abroad. If you look at it closer, it's especially in emerging countries. There's a high willingness to move abroad, and probably for various reasons. From a company perspective, it's a chance and it's also risk, right? Obviously, there's an opportunity to recruit in markets where you haven't been active before, because you can really tap into new talent pools. And that's what we also see in the market, that, for example, for digital talents, for engineering talents, etc., a lot of companies are building hubs around the world to really tap into those talent pools. And at the risk side, obviously, you need to make sure that your talents stay within your organization. I mean, attrition risk is relatively high. Again, if you look at the results from our statistics, a huge portion of talents are being approached very, very frequently with new job offers, partly on a weekly or monthly basis.
Is this higher than normal, or has it always been this way?
It has increased because talent scarcity is increasingly becoming like an international problem. So I think a colleague of mine once said, there's a war for talent and the war is over, talent has won, right? And maybe that describes it quite nicely. As a company, you don't need to just recruit your talent, you need to re-recruit your talent constantly to clearly understand what are the preferences, what are the needs, and what can I do as an employer in order to keep and attract and develop the right talent and really keep it in the organization.
Are there any industries where this is really, you're seeing this most acutely?
What we see in the market, it's not industry specific. There are certain roles in the market that are higher in demand than others. For example, obviously in the digital space, in the sales environment, etc. So there are some roles or jobs that are more demanded than others. But overall, that's something we can observe actually across industries.
We spoke about flexibility. Global instability is something that, unfortunately, I don't think is going to change anytime soon. We've also had economic uncertainty, high inflation, creating new pressures on workforce planning. How can HR help their businesses to prepare for these future disruptions? How do you get the right balance, I suppose, between, like you said, looking abroad, bearing in mind political issues that may be going on at home, for example, regulations, all sorts of things?
I think there are a couple of things that HR function can do, and obviously it's still also like a top leadership topic across, right? It's not just a pure HR topic. I mean, it really starts with this utmost critical topic of strategic workforce planning, or let's say skill planning, to really understand which trends are out there, is my business strategy, and how those external trends and my business strategy translate into workforce scenarios. What type of talents do I need? How many do I need from a quantitative perspective, but also from a qualitative skill perspective? So once I have this transparency, obviously then I can really think about how should I react from an action perspective in terms of where should I recruit? What are the skills that I need to build up with a flexible training and up and reskilling program? And where should I maybe even move the job to which markets, where should I allocate tasks in order to tap into new talent pools? On the, let's say, more softer side, I think there's a lot to do in terms of, coaching, leadership preparation. It goes as far as, thinking about what type of leadership criteria are needed in order to navigate through that uncertainty, right? Which then leads to recruiting, to promotion criteria, but also to coaching offerings within a company. But everything more or less should be based at least on some kind of quantitative scenario to really ground the action into facts.
I do want to ask, we're talking about here HR functions needing to adapt, to evolve, perhaps even new skills being brought on board, bigger part to play. When we're talking also about geopolitical instability being flexible, cost very much on the agenda, economic conditions, again, being very much on the agenda, how much financing is this going to cost to get HR up to where we need it to be?
I'm not sure whether it's really a budget topic. Obviously, what's needed is for certain topics, there is technological support needed, which requires investments, obviously, right, and data. I think if you use new technologies appropriately, there's quite often a business case even, right? I mean, you can do better work in a more efficient way if you really think through the way the HR function is run and operated.
Is it a question, actually, if you don't evolve, you won't get the right talent and your business will suffer? Quite simply.
Absolutely. I think it's really about competitiveness here. The HR function historically maybe was a bit more administrative in many organizations, right? It was more like a service function. I think if you get it right, you can ensure to have the right talents, the right skills on board. And if you have the right incentive systems, etc., I mean, you can really motivate this potential. And this can be a significant competitive advantage, or the other way around. If you don't manage that, it can be a significant disadvantage.
Looking ahead, what do you think are going to be some of the trends that if you and I were to sit down in 5-10 years' time, that you would be thinking about with HR? What would it look like within a company? What will the world of work look like?
So my vision for a very future-proof HR function would be, first of all, it would be strategic and forward-looking, right? This linked to strategic workforce planning and dynamic skill modeling. It would be very customer-centric. So all products and services would be delivered really with an eye on the customer. So what are the needs we are trying to address? It will be much more digital than today. So there will be a lot of, system support, and not only Gen AI. It could also be cloud workflows. It can be, some different applications. But it will be much more digital, and something where you have, in terms of the structural setup, it will be something where you have much more end-to-end accountability for certain HR products. Today, a lot of organizations have a separation between concept design and execution, and it sits in different parts of the organization. My view is it will come much closer together. It will be an end-to-end journey or process, right? And there will be people in charge of it, and then constantly make sure that we improve along those processes. Lastly, I think there will be new capabilities required within the HR function. Some companies might already have it, but I think at many it's not there yet. It's about strategic thinking, this modeling competence. It's about business understanding, but also really this data analytics and technology competencies that need to be added to pure, let's say, functional HR competencies.
So I've asked you about the so what. What is the now what? What are the sort of next immediate practical steps that companies, leaders, HR functions can take?
Actually, it's pretty much along those lines. The first step that you need to do really as an HR function is to set up like a strategic skill planning exercise. Take your business strategy, take your business plan, look at market trends, translate them into workforce scenarios like a first step, right? From this insight, then really derive the necessary action steps in terms of up and reskilling programs. Adjust your career path, adjust your talent management and recruiting programs accordingly based on those scenarios, right? Make sure that you really fully leverage the potential of digital support, and also rethink your operating models so that you are set up in a way that you can really accelerate along those lines.
Jens, thank you very much. And to you for listening. We'd love to know your thoughts. To get in contact, leave us a message at thesowhat@bcg.com. And if you like this podcast, why not hit subscribe and leave a rating wherever you found us. It helps other people find us too.